6 months ago, I was designing award-winning skyscrapers. Today, I know exactly which dumpsters contain edible food and which shelters won't steal your shoes while you sleep. Knowledge no architect ever dreams of needing until they lose everything. The alleyway behind Bellini's Bakery had become my sanctuary. Not because the food was exceptional, but because Enzo, the owner, discarded unsold pastries at exactly 7:45 every morning, carefully wrapped in wax paper that kept them clean. I was 46 years old, a licensed architect with nearly 2 decades of experience, and I was organizing my life around garbage schedules. That December morning started with frost crystallizing on my tattered sleeping bag and hunger gnawing at my insides. The threadbare coat I'd found at a church donation box 3 weeks earlier did little against the biting cold. Winter in Portland was unforgiving, and I knew what that meant for people like me. Some wouldn't survive until spring. I had just retrieved a half-eaten focaccia, still in its takeout box, when I heard footsteps on the slick pavement. Expensive shoes from the sound, the deliberate click of leather soles, not the heavy shuffle of security guards or the threatening stomp of someone about to chase me away. Michael Parker. The voice was crisp, professional. Michael James Parker. I turned slowly, the focaccia box still clutched in my hands. The woman standing there looked like she'd walked straight out of a corporate brochure. Charcoal gray pantsuit that probably cost more than I used to make in a week. Pearl necklace gleaming against her burgundy blouse. Her briefcase was sleek leather, and her silver-streaked hair was immaculately styled despite the drizzling rain. Who's asking? My voice emerged rougher than intended. 6 months on the streets changes how you sound, how you carry yourself, how you make eye contact. My name is Eleanor Winters, estate attorney with Winters, Zhang, and Associates in Seattle. I've been looking for you. She reached into her coat and I tensed instinctively until I saw her withdraw a photograph. Is this you? Taken in 2019? The photo showed me in front of the Sullivan Tower in downtown Portland, my greatest architectural achievement. I was smiling, clean-shaven, wearing a tailored suit, standing tall with the gleaming 32-story building behind me. My hair was neatly trimmed, my face unweathered, my eyes still bright with ambition and pride. Where did you get that? I asked, my heart pounding. Your former mentor, Professor Josephine Takahashi, passed away 6 weeks ago in Seattle. You've been named in her will. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Professor Takahashi? I haven't spoken to her in over 15 years. Winter's expression remained neutral. Professor Takahashi maintained detailed records on all her former students. She knew about your architectural firm in Portland. She knew about your divorce from Natalie, and she knew about your current circumstances. My current circumstances. I looked down at myself, at the stained jeans I'd been wearing for nearly a month, at the shoes patched with duct tape I'd found in a dumpster. You mean she knew I'd been homeless for 6 months? Yes, she knew everything, and she left you her entire estate. The focaccia container slipped from my fingers, landing on the wet asphalt with a sad splat. Her waterfront estate on Lake Washington, her extensive art collection focusing on Pacific Northwest artists, her investment portfolio built over 50 years of careful management, her rare architectural books and original blueprints collection. The total value, after taxes, is approximately $67 million. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the dumpster to keep from falling. This has to be some kind of scam. Nobody leaves that kind of money to a homeless man. Winters reached into her briefcase and extracted several documents. Winters, Zhang and Associates, has managed the Takahashi estate for over 30 years. Here's my card, my bar certification number, and a copy of the death certificate. You can verify everything. I stared at the papers, the official seals, the embossed letterhead. $67 million. 8 months ago, Natalie had sneered at me outside our former home. No one respects a failure, Michael, she'd said, climbing into her new boyfriend Richard's Porsche. You'll end up forgotten and alone. Your precious buildings will outlive any memory of you. There must be some mistake, I said. Professor Takahashi had successful students all over the world. Thomas Weber designed skyscrapers in Dubai. Maria Santos just won the Pritzker Prize. Why would she leave everything to me? There is a condition, Winters said, and there it was, the catch that would unravel everything. I cannot discuss it here. Professor Takahashi left specific instructions. You must come to Seattle to her lakeside estate and view a video message she recorded. Only then will you learn what's required to claim the inheritance. She checked her Cartier watch, which gleamed even in the gray morning light. If you refuse or fail to appear within 96 hours, the entire estate transfers to an alternate beneficiary. She paused, studying my reaction. Your ex-wife, Natalie Parker. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, taste the bitterness of 6 months of destitution, smell the desperation that had become my constant companion. Ms. Winters, she said, checking her watch again, I have a car waiting. We can be in Seattle in 3 hours. You'll have an opportunity to shower, change clothes, eat a proper meal. Whatever your decision about the inheritance, at least give yourself that dignity. I looked around the alley that had become my dining room, at the cardboard sheets behind the dumpster that served as my bedroom, at the existence that no longer deserved to be called a life. Give me 15 minutes, I said. There's someone I need to tell I'm leaving. As I walked to find Sophia, the retired nurse who'd shown me which shelters were safe and which street clinics actually helped, I couldn't shake the feeling that Professor Takahashi had orchestrated this moment years ago. The professor I'd barely thought about in 15 years, who'd mentored me through architecture school, had apparently been watching my entire life fall apart, waiting for me to reach rock bottom before extending this mysterious lifeline. The woman in the expensive suit was still standing patiently by the dumpster when I returned, looking as out of place in that alley as Hope in a homeless shelter. But she was real. The documents were real. And somewhere in Seattle, my dead mentor had left me either a fortune or one final cruel test. Either way, it had to be better than scrounging through garbage while my ex-wife told everyone I was professionally dead. 2 years ago, I had everything an architect could dream of. My firm, Parker Design Associates, occupied the entire 17th floor of a downtown Portland building. From my corner office, I could see the Sullivan Tower, my masterpiece, a sleek glass and sustainable timber hybrid that had won 3 major architectural awards and graced the cover of Architectural Digest. I had a reputation for innovative, sustainable design, a team of 28 talented professionals working under me, and a portfolio that included everything from public libraries to luxury condominiums. I had personally designed homes for tech executives, university buildings, and even a small museum. The day my life started unraveling began with a call from Natalie during a client meeting. We need to talk tonight, she said, her voice carrying that cold edge I'd been hearing more frequently. And don't say you're working late again. Natalie and I had been married for 12 years. We'd met at a charity gala where I was being honored for a pro bono community center design. She was a gallery owner with an eye for emerging artists, elegant and confident in a way that had immediately captivated me. She'd said my work showed soul, that I built spaces that understood people. Somewhere in our marriage, that admiration had curdled into contempt. Why can't you just take the corporate commissions? She'd started asking about 5 years into our marriage. Look at Jessica's husband, Marcus. He just made partner at his firm. They're vacationing in Aspen next month. Jessica was Natalie's college friend, and comparing our lives to theirs had become Natalie's favorite pastime. Marcus had been featured in Architectural Quarterly. Marcus had joined an exclusive country club. Marcus was designing a casino in Macau that would make him financially set for life. I tried to explain that I was proud of my work, that I wanted to create buildings that meant something. The Sullivan Tower will still be standing in 100 years, I'd tell her. It's carbon neutral and houses a public garden that's free for everyone. Doesn't that matter? It doesn't pay for the lifestyle we deserve, she'd reply. The night she asked for a divorce, I found her in our bedroom packing a suitcase. I've been seeing Richard Whitmore, she announced without emotion, as if she were telling me we needed milk. The real estate developer. He understands ambition. He appreciates the finer things. Richard Whitmore. I'd met him at a city planning committee meeting. All artificial tan and aggressive handshakes. The kind of man who called everyone buddy, but never remembered their names. He built cookie-cutter luxury condos that all looked identical, trading on location rather than design. The divorce was devastating in ways I hadn't anticipated. Natalie's lawyer argued that her gallery had supported my artistic indulgences early in my career. The judge awarded her our home, half my firm's value, and alimony that would bleed the business dry. My father James tried to help. At 74, he was living on his pension from 40 years as a structural engineer. My mother had died when I was in college, and Dad had never remarried. He offered me his retirement savings. I can't take that money, Dad, I told him, sitting in his modest apartment surrounded by the engineering textbooks he'd kept all these years. Your mother would want me to help, he'd insisted, his hands trembling slightly as he wrote the check. She always said your buildings had poetry in them. I took the check, promising to repay him, knowing I probably never could. My younger sister Emily had built a successful medical practice in Chicago. When I called to ask if she could spare a loan to keep the firm running, she hesitated. Mike, I've got student loans and 2 kids in private school, she'd said softly. Maybe this is a sign you should take those corporate offers Natalie was always talking about. Even my sister had taken Natalie's side. The firm couldn't survive the financial bleeding. I had to let people go. First the newer designers, then my office manager who'd been with me from the beginning. Finally, I was working alone, desperately trying to finish projects with impossible deadlines, sleeping on the office couch to save on rent after I lost my apartment. The final project I completed was a small reading room for a public library, pro bono work I'd committed to months earlier. I designed it knowing I'd never be paid, knowing it would be my last work. The day after I submitted the final plans, the bank foreclosed on the office. My daughter Lily was 19 then, a sophomore at Rhode Island School of Design. Natalie had poisoned her against me completely. Mom says you cared more about your artistic integrity than providing for your family, she texted. She says you could have been successful like Richard if you weren't so stubborn. That text cut deeper than losing my firm, my reputation, everything I'd built. Within a month of the foreclosure, I was living in my car. When that got repossessed, all I had left was a backpack, a sleeping bag, and my architect's scale. The first night on the streets, I walked until morning, too terrified to sleep, too proud to call the few friends I had left. By the 6th month, I'd mastered the brutal mathematics of homelessness, which bakeries discarded edible food, which corners the police ignored, which shelters had the fewest bedbugs. The last time I saw Natalie was outside the art gallery that had once been hers before Richard bought her a larger space in the trendy Pearl District. She was hosting an opening, champagne glass in hand, looking radiant in a dress that probably cost more than I'd spent on food in the last 6 months. She saw me before I could turn away, watching through the window. The disgust on her face was absolute. For God's sake, Michael, she said after stepping outside, holding a hand over her nose. You look like garbage. Is this what you've become? Richard appeared at her side, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. You're pathetic, she called as he pulled her back toward the gallery. You'll die alone and forgotten. Just another homeless man that people step over? That was 2 months ago. Every morning since, waking up on cardboard or concrete, I heard those words echoing. She was probably right. Men like me didn't recover from this kind of fall. We just disappeared, became statistics, invisible to the world we once belonged to. Standing in that alley with Eleanor Winters, holding papers that claimed I'd inherited millions, I couldn't reconcile the architect with award-winning buildings and magazine covers with what I'd become, somewhere between the dedicated professional with clean fingernails and a respected signature and this hollow-eyed stranger who knew which dumpsters contained salvageable food. I'd lost myself completely, but Professor Takahashi had apparently been watching the entire time, waiting for me to hit bottom, preparing something I couldn't yet understand. The December morning that changed everything started with me waking behind a loading dock, frost making my joints ache like I'd aged decades overnight. I'd lost track of the days, Wednesday maybe, or Thursday. The days blended together when you measured time by garbage collection schedules. Bellini's Bakery discarded their day-old bread and pastries at precisely 7:45 every morning. Enzo Bellini never said anything when he saw me waiting, just nodded slightly as he placed the bags carefully on top of the dumpster rather than inside it. Sometimes there were coffee grounds mixed with still warm pastries, and I'd scrape them into a cup with rainwater to make something resembling coffee. I had just retrieved a container of focaccia when I heard those footsteps. Clean, deliberate, expensive shoes on wet pavement. After months on the streets, you learn to classify people by their footsteps. Who was dangerous, who might offer help, who would pretend not to see you. Mr. Michael James Parker, the woman, standing there radiated the kind of professional confidence that comes with expensive education and financial security. Her charcoal pantsuit was impeccably tailored, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. She was perhaps in her late 50s, with intelligent eyes that assessed me without judgment. "Who's asking?" My voice emerged defensively, wary after months of being alternately invisible and unwelcome. "My name is Eleanor Winters, a state attorney from Winters, Jung and Associates in Seattle." She reached into her coat slowly, as if knowing sudden movements might startle me. "I've been searching for you for 3 weeks. She extracted a photograph that made my chest tighten. It was me from my previous life, standing proudly in front of the Sullivan Tower on opening day. My hair was neatly cut, my custom suit perfectly fitted. My eyes still contained the confidence of a man who believed his talent would protect him from disaster. "Is this you? Taken in 2019? How did you get that?" The photo should have disappeared when my firm's website went offline months ago. "Your former professor and mentor, Josephine Takahashi, passed away 6 weeks ago. Before her death, she maintained detailed files on all her former students. You were particularly difficult to locate after you lost your permanent address." Professor Takahashi. I had perhaps a dozen clear memories of the brilliant Japanese-American architect who had transformed architectural education at University of Washington. Stern but encouraging, demanding excellence while nurturing creativity. She'd written my recommendation letter for my first internship, had attended the Sullivan Tower opening, sending a simple note afterward. "You built something that matters, Michael. Remember why." "I haven't spoken to Professor Takahashi in 15 years, I said. "Why would she be looking for me?" "Because she named you the sole beneficiary of her entire estate." The focaccia container slipped from my numb fingers, splattering on the wet asphalt. "That's impossible." "I assure you it's quite possible and entirely legal." Winters opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. Professor Takahashi's estate includes her Lake Washington waterfront property, valued at $18 million, her art collection worth approximately $12 million, and an investment portfolio currently valued at $35 million. Additional assets include her architectural library, original blueprints collection, and intellectual property rights to her designs. Total estate value is $67 million after taxes and fees. I grabbed the edge of the dumpster because the world was spinning. $67 million. Yesterday, I'd been grateful for half a sandwich someone had tossed aside. Now, this stranger in a pantsuit was telling me I was rich. "This has to be a scam," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew no scammer would bother with someone like me. What could they possibly steal? My sleeping bag? The $23 hidden in my sock? Winters pulled out official documents with embossed seals and watermarks. "The death certificate," she said, showing me each paper. "The will filed with King County Probate Court. My credentials from the Washington State Bar Association. Our firm has handled the Takahashi estate for over 30 years. "But why me?" My voice cracked. "Professor Takahashi has successful students all over the world. Thomas Weber designed skyscrapers in Dubai. Maria Santos just won the Pritzker Prize last year. They actually kept in touch with her, visited her. Why would she leave everything to the family failure?" Winters' expression softened slightly, something like understanding crossing her features. "There is a condition attached to the inheritance. Professor Takahashi left specific instructions that cannot be discussed here. You must come to Seattle to her Lake Washington estate and watch a video message she recorded before her death. Only then will you learn what's required to claim the estate." Of course there was a catch. There was always a catch. "What kind of condition?" "I'm legally prohibited from discussing it outside of the residence." She glanced at her watch. "However, I can tell you that you have 96 hours to hear the terms. If you refuse or fail to appear, the entire estate transfers to an alternate beneficiary." "Who?" "Your ex-wife, Natalie Parker." I actually staggered backwards. Natalie, who'd taken everything in the divorce, who'd mocked my fall, who told me I'd die alone and forgotten. The thought of her getting Professor Takahashi's millions made me physically ill. Professor Takahashi was remarkably thorough in her research, Winters continued. She knew about your divorce, about Ms. Parker's relationship with Richard Whitmore, about their recent engagement announcement 3 weeks ago. Richard had proposed to Natalie. Some part of me, the petty part that surviving on the streets hadn't completely killed, felt a twist of satisfaction imagining her reaction if she learned about this inheritance. The car is waiting at the corner of Pine and Broadway, Winters said. We can be in Seattle by noon. There's a shower at my firm's offices, fresh clothes waiting. Whatever you decide about the inheritance, Mr. Parker, at least give yourself the dignity of a hot meal in a comfortable place to rest. I looked around at what my life had become. The dumpster I'd been feeding from, the makeshift shelter under the loading dock where I'd sleep tonight if I stayed. Sophia's shopping cart in the distance, the faded rainbow umbrella she'd attached to it fluttering in the winter wind. This was my reality now, but it didn't have to remain that way. What could the condition possibly be? I asked, more to myself than to Winters. I can say only this. Professor Takahashi believed in teaching through challenge. She wrote in her final instructions that she'd chosen you for reasons that would become clear. Teaching through challenge. That sounded like her. Every project in her studio classes had contained some seemingly impossible constraint that ultimately forced creativity. Give me 20 minutes, I said finally. I need to say goodbye to someone, and I need to think. Of course. Winters handed me a business card, heavy stock that felt foreign against my calloused fingers. The car will be at the corner in 20 minutes. A black Mercedes, license plate WZA1. As she walked away, those expensive shoes clicking on the pavement, I stood holding a business card worth more than everything else I owned combined. Somewhere in Seattle, a dead professor I hadn't spoken to in 15 years had created some kind of test. Some condition that would either give me $67 million or hand it all to the woman who delighted in my destruction. I found Sophia organizing her meager possessions under a nearby overpass. At 65, the former ER nurse had been on the streets for 3 years after medical bills from her husband's cancer treatment bankrupted her. She'd taught me which clinics would help without demanding insurance, which shelters were safe for someone still learning street survival. Architect, she called, her nickname for me since I'd sketched a small shelter design for her cart. You look like you've seen a ghost. Something's happened, Sophia. Either I'm about to get incredibly lucky, or I'm walking into the cruelest trap anyone's ever set. I showed her Winters' card, the paper so pristine it seemed otherworldly among our dirt-stained possessions. A lawyer found me, says my old professor died and left me money. A lot of money. Sophia squinted at the card, then at me. Is this for real? She showed me official papers. Death certificate, will, everything. She wants me to go to Seattle today. If this is legitimate, if even part of it is real, I might not be coming back. Sophia set down the blanket she'd been folding and studied my face. In 6 months, she'd taught me everything about surviving the streets, which alleys were safe, how to layer newspapers under your clothes for insulation, where to find public restrooms that wouldn't kick you out. She kept me alive when I'd contemplated ending it all during those first terrible weeks. You remember what I told you when you first showed up here, she asked. Trust no one offering something for nothing? The other thing. I thought back to those early terrifying days. Every closed door is another door waiting to open. You just have to survive long enough to find it. That's right. She reached into her cart and pulled out something wrapped in a scrap of clean cloth, handed it to me. It was a small silver compass, tarnished but functional, with a tiny architectural scale etched on its back. Found this in a pawn shop window last month. Was going to give it to you for Christmas. Looks like you'll need it sooner. The gesture nearly broke me. This woman who had almost nothing was giving me one of her few treasures. Sophia, I can't take this. Can't. You can and you will. Her voice took on the authoritative tone from her nursing days. And if this thing is real, if you get this money, don't forget about us out here. Don't become one of those people who crosses the street when they see what they used to be. If this works out, I'll come back for you. I promise. Don't make promises the world might not let you keep, she said gently. Just remember, we're all still human beings. That's all any of us want, to be seen as human. I embraced her thin shoulders, this woman who'd become my unlikely lifeline in the darkest period of my life, then walked to Pine and Broadway. The black Mercedes was waiting, engine running, Eleanor Winters in the back seat typing on a slim laptop. The drive to Seattle was surreal. The leather seats felt impossibly soft after months of concrete and cardboard. The car had climate control, something I'd forgotten existed. Winters handed me a folder with documents about Professor Takahashi's estate, pages of legal terminology I couldn't focus on. My mind kept returning to the condition, the test that stood between me and $67 million, or between Natalie and $67 million. At the Winters, Zhang and Associates offices in downtown Seattle, Winters led me to a private washroom. The shower facilities are through there, she said. I took the liberty of having clothes delivered in your size, based on your driver's license records. The shower was transformative. Hot water that didn't cut off after 3 minutes. Soap that smelled like sandalwood instead of industrial detergent. I stood under that stream until my skin pruned, watching 6 months of street life swirl down the drain. My reflection in the mirror was shocking. Gaunt cheeks, hollow eyes, a beard that had grown wild and unkempt. But beneath the physical changes was something worse. A flatness in my gaze, as if something essential had been extinguished. The clothes fit well. Charcoal slacks, a blue button-down shirt, a casual gray blazer. Nothing ostentatious, but clean and new. For the first time in months, I looked almost human again. Winters drove me personally to Lake Washington, to a modern cedar and glass home perched on the waterfront. Massive windows framed views of the lake and distant mountains. The architecture was distinctly Takahashi. Clean lines that respected the natural setting, spaces that flowed organically into one another. Professor Takahashi's study is this way, Winters said, leading me through rooms filled with museum-quality Northwest Coast indigenous art and mid-century furniture. The study was intimate despite its wall of windows, dominated by a substantial desk crafted from a single slab of redwood. Built-in bookshelves held architectural volumes I recognized instantly. First editions of Le Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, Zaha Hadid. A large screen was mounted on the only solid wall. The video message will play once, Winters said, gesturing to a leather chair positioned before the screen. Professor Takahashi was very specific about that. I'll be in the next room when you've finished. She pressed a remote, and the screen flickered to life. Professor Takahashi appeared, and my breath caught. She looked essentially the same as I remembered, though her black hair had gone completely silver. Her posture remained impeccable, her gaze as penetrating as it had been in studio critiques. She wore a simple black tunic over gray pants, a single jade pendant at her throat. "Hello, Michael." Her voice was stronger than I remembered, with the same precise diction. "If you're watching this, then Eleanor found you living on the streets, probably trying to maintain your dignity while your world collapsed around you. I know this because I've been following your career since you graduated. All my students, actually, but you most carefully." She leaned forward slightly. "I imagine you're wondering why I've left you my estate when we haven't spoken in 15 years. The answer is simple. You're the only one who failed magnificently enough to need it." I felt as if she'd slapped me. "The condition for your inheritance is this. Within 3 years, you must design and oversee the construction of housing for at least 200 people currently experiencing homelessness. Not sterile shelters, not institutional dormitories, real, dignified homes that restore humanity and possibility. Eleanor will oversee a trust that will finance the project, but the vision must be entirely yours." I stared at the screen, my architect's mind already racing despite my shock. "You'll have access to the full estate to accomplish this, but if you fail or refuse, everything goes to your ex-wife, Natalie. I've met her at several gallery openings. An ambitious woman with excellent taste and absolutely no soul." My lips twitched in an almost smile. Professor Takahashi had always been brutally honest. "You're wondering why, Michael? Why this condition? Why you? Let me tell you something none of my students ever knew. In 1975, fresh from winning my first major commission, my husband left me for my business partner. Within a year, I lost my firm, my reputation, and eventually my home. For 11 months, I lived in my car, and then on the streets of Los Angeles, too ashamed to contact family, too proud to ask colleagues for help. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Josephine Takahashi, architectural legend, had been homeless. An architect named Gabriel Martinez found me sleeping in a park. He didn't just offer charity, he offered partnership. He gave me a desk in his small office, put my name next to his on the door before I designed a single thing for him. He restored my dignity by treating me as a peer rather than a charity case. The camera angle shifted slightly as she adjusted her position. I built my career from that second chance, eventually buying Gabriel's share when he retired. I became successful, respected, influential. But I also became isolated, focused only on my work, keeping people at arm's length. I watched my students from a distance, tracking their successes and failures. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your cousin Thomas designs stunning skyscrapers that exist primarily as status symbols for oil billionaires. Maria creates beautiful museums that most people will never enter. But you, Michael, you design buildings that serve communities. The Sullivan Tower incorporated affordable housing units and public gardens. Your community centers prioritize light and accessibility over architectural showing off. She leaned forward again, her gaze intensifying. Then you lost everything, just as I once did. Eleanor's investigators sent reports. You sleeping in your car, then on loading docks. And do you know what they observed? You sketching shelter designs for other homeless individuals. You sharing food when you barely had enough. You teaching a young man how to read architectural plans at that day labor site. I remember that. Diego, a 19-year-old who wanted to work construction but couldn't interpret blueprints. I'd spent 2 weeks teaching him during lunch breaks. That's why you inherit everything. Not despite your failure, but because of how you've responded to it, because you retained your humanity when you had every reason to abandon it. She sat back, a slight smile crossing her face. But here's what no one else will know until the will is filed publicly next week. Your ex-wife is in financial trouble. Richard Whitmore's development company is under federal investigation for cutting corners on building safety. The gallery he bought her is hemorrhaging money. They're about to lose everything. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a hollow acknowledgement of life's strange circles. If you refuse my condition or fail to complete it, she inherits everything. Imagine that, Michael. The woman who mocked your fall becoming wealthy from your refusal of this challenge. I thought the symmetry might motivate you. Her expression grew serious again. But here's the real test, Michael. It's not about the buildings you'll design. It's about whether you can accept that failure is sometimes the necessary path to your most important work. Gabriel saved me, but I never fully accepted that I needed saving. I remained aloof, independent to a fault. I died accomplished but alone, having pushed away anyone who tried to truly know me. She coughed slightly, and I noticed for the first time the medical equipment just out of frame. Don't become me, Michael. Take the money, build your housing, but build connections too. And remember that the true measure of architecture isn't in awards or magazine covers, but in the lives made better by the spaces you create. The screen went dark, then lit up with a final message. You have 48 hours to decide, but I already know your answer. You're an architect to your bones. You build things because you can't help yourself. Welcome back to the drafting table, Michael. The screen went black. I sat in that leather chair in a $67 million lake house, tears streaming down my face, thinking about Professor Takahashi sleeping in a Los Angeles park, about Gabriel Martinez offering partnership instead of charity, about the hundreds of people sleeping on Portland streets tonight. Winters entered quietly. Mr. Parker, what is your decision? I stood up, wiping my face with my sleeve, thinking of Sophia organizing her blankets, of Diego learning to read blueprints, of all the invisible people I'd lived among these past 6 months. I'll do it, I said. Not for the money and not because of Natalie. I'll do it because it's the building I was meant to design all along. Winters smiled, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. Professor Takahashi said you'd say exactly that. Shall we discuss the trust structure? I looked out at Lake Washington, at the mountains beyond, at all that open space and possibility. Somewhere out there were 200 people I was going to help house. But first I had to rebuild myself. Professor Takahashi was right about that. The money was just a tool. The real inheritance was the chance to matter again, to create something essential, to be the architect I was always meant to become. Yes, I said, let's begin. I stood at those magnificent windows for a long time after Winters left to prepare the paperwork, watching boats move across Lake Washington as evening fell. Each light represented someone's life, someone's story, someone's struggle. 24 hours ago, I'd been fighting off the cold behind a loading dock. Now I owned this house and had $67 million to create homes for people society had forgotten. The first person I called was my father. Eleanor had purchased a cell phone for me, and his number was one of the few I still remembered. Michael? His voice cracked when he realized it was me. Son, where are you? I've been so worried. Dad, something incredible has happened, I said, my own voice unsteady. Professor Takahashi left me her estate. All of it. But there's a condition, a project I need to complete. Josephine Takahashi? Your professor from architecture school? He sounded stunned. Michael, where have you been? I hired a private investigator who couldn't find you. I've been on the streets, Dad. Homeless. Too ashamed to call anyone. His quiet sob broke my heart. You should have called me. I would have helped. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. But I'm okay now, and I need your engineering expertise. I'm going to build housing for homeless people. Real, dignified homes. Will you help me? Of course I will. When can I see you? Within a week, I'd established the Takahashi Foundation for Dignified Housing. My father arrived in Seattle, moving into the lake house with me to help develop initial plans. Eleanor Winters helped structure the financial aspects, ensuring the full estate would be available for both the housing project and my personal rehabilitation. The first design challenge was understanding the diverse needs of people experiencing homelessness. I spent weeks interviewing people on the streets, in shelters, at day centers. Sophia was the first person I brought to Seattle, not as a recipient of charity, but as a paid consultant. Her insight was invaluable. Don't make it look like institutional housing, she said firmly. That immediately signals you're different, less than. Build beautiful spaces that anyone would want to live in. We developed a modular design system that could be rapidly constructed, but didn't look mass-produced. Each unit had natural light, privacy, storage, and its own bathroom. Details homeless individuals repeatedly mentioned as crucial to dignity. Diego joined the project as our first apprentice, his natural spatial intelligence quickly developing into real design skill. I established a training program where residents could learn construction and maintenance skills, creating not just homes, but career paths. By month 4, we'd broken ground on the first site in Portland, a former warehouse district converted to a mixed-use community with housing, health services, job training facilities, and shared gardens. My father worked tirelessly on the structural engineering, creating systems that were both affordable and durable. His joy at working alongside me again was palpable. We spent evenings poring over plans the way we had when I was a child, learning to draw my first blueprints. My daughter Lily called after seeing an article about the foundation in Architectural Record. Her voice was hesitant, uncertain. Dad, I saw what you're building. It's amazing. Thank you, Lily. I tried to keep the emotion from my voice. Mom told me things about why you disappeared. I should have tried harder to find you. You were a teenager dealing with your parents' divorce. It wasn't your responsibility. Can I come see the project? Maybe over spring break? Rizit has a new urban housing studio, and your project is exactly what we're studying. That's how I reconnected with my daughter, not through millions, but through architecture. She arrived with her sketchbook and 1,000 questions, staying in the lake house for 2 weeks. Her fresh perspective resulted in design improvements for the communal spaces that we incorporated immediately. By year 2, we completed housing for 128 people. Each resident had their own space, but was part of a supportive community. The buildings were beautiful, not ostentatious, but dignified, with materials and proportions that respected both their inhabitants and neighborhoods. Then Natalie appeared at the Portland site during a community open house. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack business attire. The superior confidence had been replaced by something more subdued. Michael, she said, standing awkwardly at the edge of the gathering, I read about what you're doing here. What do you want, Natalie? I kept my voice neutral, professional. Richard's company collapsed after the federal investigation. The gallery went under. I've been working as a sales associate at Nordstrom. She couldn't meet my eyes. I was wrong about everything. About you. About what matters. I looked at this woman who had once been the center of my world, who had laughed at my downfall, who had told me I'd die forgotten in the street. The old me would have felt vindication. The homeless me would have been bitter. But the person Professor Takahashi had challenged me to become saw something else. Another human being facing her own fall. I can't be with you again, Natalie. That part of our lives is over. I know, I'm not asking for that. She hesitated. I'm asking if there might be a position at the foundation. I still know people in the art world. Maybe I could help coordinate donations for the community spaces. I studied her face, searching for manipulation and finding only genuine humility. We have a 6-month probationary period for all new staff, same as everyone else. No special treatment. She nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. That's fair. Thank you. By year 3, we'd completed housing for 216 people across 3 sites. Each location had become not just housing, but a community with shared gardens, educational spaces, and support services. Many residents had found employment either through our training programs or with partner organizations. The final site was the most ambitious, a downtown Portland location where we constructed a mixed-use building combining residential units for formerly homeless individuals with a community design center. The center offered free architectural services to nonprofit organizations and training for residents interested in design and construction careers. The day we reached our goal of 200 housed individuals, Eleanor Winters brought a small leather journal to the lake house. I found this among Professor Takahashi's personal papers, she said. It's from 1976, during her time with Gabriel Martinez. The entry was dated June 12, 1976, written in Josephine's precise handwriting. Gabriel asked why I insist on designing affordable housing projects when we could pursue more lucrative commissions. I couldn't explain that when you've slept on concrete, you understand that architecture isn't just about creating beautiful spaces. It's about creating necessary ones. Every human deserves dignity in their shelter. This isn't charity, it's justice. Perhaps someday I'll find a student who truly understands this. I stood in the study where Professor Takahashi's video had changed my life, holding her private thoughts from nearly 50 years ago. She had set me a challenge that completed a circle started before I was born, from her homelessness to her success to my fall and resurrection. 3 years after that morning, behind Bellini's Bakery, the Takahashi Foundation had housed 237 people, created 45 jobs, and established a model being replicated in 3 other cities. My father had moved permanently to Seattle to continue working with me. My daughter had graduated and joined the foundation as a junior designer. Sophia headed our resident advisory board. Diego was completing his architectural studies while working as my assistant. The foundation had grown with major donors joining our cause. The housing we'd built wasn't just functional. It had won 3 design awards for innovative community integration. I'd been invited to speak at architecture schools about dignified design for vulnerable populations. But the most important moment came when I visited our first Portland site and found a man sketching in the community garden. I used to be an artist before, he gestured vaguely, indicating the years of hardship that had led him there. Never thought I'd draw again. May I see? I asked, sitting beside him on the bench I'd designed to capture the morning light. He handed me a sketchbook, detailed drawings of the building, the gardens, people sitting in the communal kitchen. In the corner of each drawing, he'd written, "Home, finally." Standing in Professor Takahashi's study, now my study, I realized the true inheritance wasn't the money or the property. It was understanding that architecture at its most essential isn't about creating monuments or winning awards. It's about creating spaces where human dignity can flourish. Professor Takahashi had learned that lesson through her own fall. She'd passed it to me through mine. And now, through the buildings we'd created together across time, we were passing it on to hundreds of others. Each person housed, each life reclaimed, each dignity restored was another link in a chain of compassion stretching back to Gabriel Martinez, finding a brilliant architect sleeping in a park, and forward to whatever the Takahashi Foundation would yet become. My father had a saying, "We build our buildings, and then our buildings build us." Professor Takahashi understood that in ways I was only beginning to grasp. The true architecture wasn't in the physical structures, but in the communities they created. The invisible bonds between people who recognized each other's humanity. If this story touched your heart, if it made you reconsider the invisible people you pass on the street, then please remember, every person you encounter is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind. See the human being beneath the circumstances. And remember that sometimes what looks like failure is actually the foundation for something more meaningful than success ever could have built.